Well, if I may start on that one. If you go back in Jewish tradition to the Talmud, which is the collection of rabbinic debate and rabbinic law going back over 2,000 years, already there, and this is 2,000 years ago, there is an ambivalence toward the death penalty. There is a sense that the death penalty is becoming less and less viable a form of punishment. It doesn't function very well as a deterrent. And at one point, one of the rabbis of the Talmud says a court that executes one person in 70 years should be considered bloodthirsty. Once in 70 years to do the death penalty is pretty dramatic. It's a pretty dramatic statement, and that's already 2,000 years ago. So at least within the Jewish community and within Jewish tradition, there is a pretty strong ambivalence, and has for a very long time, a strong ambivalence toward any kind of final punishment as executed by human beings. Even the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel, which is surrounded by enemies, and which has jails full of terrorists with blood on their hands who have killed not one, not two, but 20 and 30 and 40 people. They've only executed one person, and it was a Nazi war criminal. It was Eichmann. They have executed one person in their entire history. That's pretty dramatic.
You know, and I think the overriding biblical message is from the great prophet: do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. And the Episcopal Church, now for almost 70 years, has consistently taught and advocated for the repeal of the death penalty. And my predecessors spoke as I do. But I think that also today we're at a time in the life of the modern world where it's just clear that there are acceptable alternatives, and society is safe, can be made safe. And so in a sense, it makes common sense today in a way that perhaps in another generation it didn't.
In the United Church of Christ, we have a very strong history of championing justice issues. And along with that history comes a way for us to define justice, which is what builds up a community. That is what is just, if it builds up a community. And in the past, that was probably felt by some of our predecessors that was what built up the community. Nowadays, that has shifted for us. Among the things that helped shift that was our own sense of what restorative justice is about, where you work with the victim or the victim's family in some cases to bring them to a place where they are built up as part of that community. In light of DNA testing and some of the results there around who is innocent and who is not, that has certainly changed the debate within our own tradition around it. And we're now at the point of filling out with the other alternatives, particularly jail without parole and things of that nature, that the more just thing to do is to repeal the death penalty, because that is now what tearing at some of the seams of our communities.
And just to reiterate what Bishop Wright said, the clear message for Christians from Jesus is that every life is valuable. That's constantly. And what's different today is that we can find an alternative that we couldn't 300 or 400 years ago to keep the public safe. And I think it just makes it even more important for us to work hard to respect each life, no matter how horrible it looks at the present time, because it's God's gift.
I guess the question that I have is, you know, obviously you're down here today doing this press conference. I imagine you'll be meeting with some representatives, especially those who are on the committee. And, you know, a couple of them are retired police officers in law enforcement and have been involved in law enforcement. So what do you tell them, or, you know, what can you tell them that could possibly maybe change their mind or at least make them see differently, because some of them have already come out and said they're, absolutely opposed to repealing the death penalty, especially without provisions for those who have been involved in killing other police officers or correctional officers. So,
I would think that we just want them to have a discussion. I'd like to share, I'd like them to know what the four of us think from our various congregations and our responsibilities, but I wouldn't assume we would change people's minds if they're firmly in, and especially if they've seen that tragedy. But once again, just to reiterate, we'd like that to be a significant discussion. We don't know which way it would go. We know what's happened in the surrounding states. But I think that just to have the discussion is what's most important to us now. Obviously, we would like our view to be dominant, but that's, once again, that's why we elect officials.
There is a way, and you're correct, Bishop, you can change your mind, and we're not here, I didn't feel I was invited down here to do that. I was invited down here to give voice to what the congregations of the United Church of Christ in this state hold dear to them. And we certainly understand that we lost a friend and a comrade and a colleague to a death in some terrible situations. The first thing we would do would be to sit with them and understand their pain. But at the same time, it introduces a discussion, which is how do we move forward in the language of my denomination, how do we then build up that community from where it has been torn? And so we would hope that that type of discussion would move forward.
And that we're neighbors, we're citizens, we're servants of this community, and we have profound respect for conscience and for beliefs of others, and we believe that it's particularly important that our legislators, our public leaders understand our position. And this is really unprecedented. I've been a bishop now for 18 years here in Delaware, and this is the first time we've met together and spoken in an interfaith forum in such a clear way. And we want folks to understand that and to have that kind of dialogue, and in the belief that all the citizens of our state should be engaged in this, and that we will be a better state and a better, stronger community for having had the broader conversation.
The individuals in your congregations, are they overwhelmingly against the death penalty? What have they said to you folks?
The leadership of my congregation voted 2 years ago to put a position out formally as a congregation to align itself with the reform movement in its opposition to the death penalty and urge its repeal at that time for that bill, and that's been reiterated. So the congregation, I'm not going to say it speaks with one voice, it never does, especially in Judaism. There's always a diversity of opinion, but the congregation itself has taken a stand, which is fairly unprecedented for us.
At our most recent diocesan convention, we have 300 delegates from our parishes around Delaware. And we have a parish right on the state line in Delmar. We have one in Claymont where you can look out and see Pennsylvania, and really literally in all the towns all across the state. And I spoke as part of my address to the convention about this issue and was as clear as I am being today. And when I finished that part of my address, the delegates rose and gave me a standing ovation, applause. Now that's also not to say that Episcopalians don't have different perspectives, and they certainly have the freedom to disagree with their bishop. But I would say that a very significant majority of Episcopalians support the repeal of the death penalty, particularly understanding that there are acceptable alternatives to secure public safety.
We have, the conference I represent encompasses many states, Maryland and New Jersey among them. So these have been discussions within our conference and conference-wide. Very lively debates, very strong voices on either side. Ultimately, the decision was if we were going to err, we would err on the side of preserving life and understanding that represents a majority, but there's still others who feel otherwise.
In my diocese, we have more than 250,000 Catholics, but we also are part of the United States Bishops' Conference with 295 dioceses, and I'm part of the administrative committee there, and we also are under the Holy Father, and in all those arenas, there is this strong feeling that the death penalty should be repealed. Among my own people in Delaware, I take heart in the 64% who feel that if there were a significant alternative, they would prefer that. We have not had a caucus, within our diocese, and as Bishop Wright knows, some people follow the mind lead and some don't, and that's the beauty of life. But I feel there's a strong sense that with the significant alternative and the safety of our people, death penalty should be repealed.
Great.
Okay, do you think we've had enough?
Great.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
all
all
very,
very
very
much.
much.
Much
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll give you my card. Make it easier. You stick around and